Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Material Matters with Grant Gibson. For listeners who might be new to all this, the idea is I speak to a designer, maker, artist or architect about a material or technique with which they're intrinsically linked and discover how it changed their lives and careers. Every once in a while, though, I break my own self-imposed format and just have someone on I'd like to have a bit of a natter with, quite frankly. Today is one of those episodes, and I'm delighted to talk to the excellent Sophie Thomas. Now, I think it's safe to say that Sophie has a CV that can genuinely be described as intriguing. As one website put it, she's an unusual mix of campaigner, practicing designer, and chartered waste manager. She's been at the forefront of the debate about sustainable design for the best part of 30 years, and in 2025 was awarded an OBE for her tireless work. Among other things, she founded the pioneering communications consultancy Thomas Matthews in 1997 and led the influential Great Recovery project in 2012. Currently, she wears a number of always sustainable hats that seem to be constantly changing, as you will discover as this interview progresses. Sophie, lovely to see you. How the dickens are you?
Oh, busy. I'm busy.
Okay.
Grant, I'm sort of shifting around, and it's exciting times, actually. Good time to talk to you because I'm really changing my direction and shifting over, but also, as usual, starting new projects.
Right. Well, we'll get into some of this. Was that description reasonably accurate?
Yeah, it's pretty accurate. I was talking to a number of students at the last week, and I was called a polymath, which I thought was quite.
So that's the word I should have used. Is that what you're saying?
No, I think you did it justice.
Okay.
You defined it well.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Should we talk first and foremost? I was going to go into a traditional question, but actually, before we do that, what I'd like to talk about is your OBE. Did that come as a bit of a surprise?
Yes, it really did, and it was very humbling because you have to remember that these things come from your industry and they're not from the palace, and they're not like, you get a letter from government saying we're going to put you forward. Are you up for it? And it was a real shock. I don't know the ins and outs of where it came from, but. So
you have no idea who might have put you forward?
Not really, no. I have no idea, but I can imagine it was.
Who gave you the goal? Which member?
Princess Royal. So Princess Anne, which is fantastic. We had a very long chat about natural materials and about the proliferance of fossil fuels and how we both loved wood.
Okay, that's interesting. That sounds like quite a long chat, actually.
It was
people behind you must have been getting
chat.
Quite frustrating. Yeah,
I think she got really into it. So it was really nice. I've actually met her before. I had lunch with her when I was doing the Great Recovery. She came, and she's one of the patrons of the RSA, and she came for lunch, and I gave a little speech with her. I sat next to her for lunch, and we were talking about repairing clothing for quite a long time.
Does she get into that? She does a lot of that herself.
Yeah, she's really behind it all, yeah.
And did she recognise you in that case?
Oh, no. If only.
Yeah.
Not at all. But no, it was a really nice day, actually. Yeah, great. I felt really, and I was wearing a fantastic dress that I'd designed with Becky Earley, who you've had here on your podcast.
Big fan of Becky's.
We've developed a new collaboration, which is one of the things that I'll be going into later, hopefully, called Design Flaw. It was a collaboration of letterpress and hot press, and it had all my projects letterpressed on the bottom. And so I went with all the kind of projects sort of attached to my skirt, so to speak.
Nice. Well, look, we have a tradition, as I suspect you may know on this podcast, of asking people about where and how they work, getting them to describe their surroundings, the notion being that you can learn something about the person by the way that they deal with their stuff, I guess. We're talking across the internet currently. So where are you right now, Sophie?
Well, I'm currently at home in my makeshift study, but normally, if I'm at home, I'm in my printing shed where all my woodblock letterpress type is. And I have 2 presses in there, 2 very simple proofing presses. They're not big, but they do work for me. And I have all my pigments as well that I've been making, and lots of beach plastic. So it's a very colourful, very chaotic. It's my chaos, though. It's my rules, my chaos. And
so you're a messy worker, in other words.
I'm a messy, creative, expressionistic kind of.
And is that a reflection on how your brain works?
Yes, absolutely. It's complete chaos in there. I wouldn't go in there. But yeah, so I'm either there or I'm sort of knee deep in waste, I would suggest. I spend a lot of time, and I'm spending a lot of time in different waste facilities around the UK at the moment. So I'm taking a team of designers around. We're looking at different ways that we think we work with end of life of materials. As you know, I'm really into waste. I use a lot of waste materials in my own creative practice. And I'm really curious about the flow of stuff that goes through our lives.
We will get into that. What I'm keen to ask first and foremost, though, is you seem to wear, as I said in the intro, a huge number of hats. I mean, on your email sign-off, for instance, you list the following: Senior Director, Useful Simple Trust, Director of Circular Design at Useful Projects, Founding Director of Thomas Matthews, Royal Academy of Engineering, Visiting Professor. I know you were teaching at Falmouth, which you've kind of mentioned last week. On your LinkedIn profile, it also says you're the founding partner of Etzor Ventures, as well as the co-founder and partner of Urge. That's a lot of jobs, Sophie.
I know.
So, I mean, you've talked about being in waste and doing some letterpress, but what does your standard day kind of look like? It can't just be letterpress and trash. I mean, you've got all these positions.
I wish it was.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Great, isn't it? So yes, I'm currently a senior director at the Useful Simple Trust, which I've been there. That's where Thomas Matthews went. So Thomas Matthews set up with myself and Christine in 1997, as you said, once we both came out of the Royal College, and we ran the communication design studio for about 7-8 years before we then shifted it into, or reversed it effectively into the Useful Simple Trust, which was one of the first studios to become employee benefit trust, so owned by the beneficiaries who worked there. So I basically gave Thomas Matthews away to the people who work at Thomas Matthews and others. And then from that, I became a founder of the trust. And then I suppose that I did that part-time for quite a long time, the last sort of 10 years. And then I've had all these side hustles, but they're more campaign. I suppose that's where a lot of my campaign work comes. You know, if I'm really interested in waste and designing out waste, I will look into, how Etzor, for instance, came from meeting people who were interested in how my sort of struggle or interest and struggle with how designers get to specify materials which are innovative and on the edge of really changing sustainability and thinking about regenerative design, etc. So they were starting to spec materials which were just coming onto market, but they weren't on market enough. So there wasn't enough of it, or we were trying to find alternatives for PVC or plastic when we were designing things in Thomas Matthews, and there wasn't enough of it. So Etzor is about really accelerating startups to get to a point where we can start really supplying and disrupting. So you're funding startups, in other words? We funded 2 startups, yeah, through the venture studio Etzor, but we also now run in what we're calling the intelligence side. So setting up a platform which is using AI to help me research and develop where the waste materials can actually become new materials. So it's complex, but it's absolutely fascinating. Yeah. So the Useful Simple Trust, essentially, design consultancy with a very specific philosophy that you folded Thomas Matthews in, and we'll talk a bit more about Thomas Matthews throughout the interview, I'm sure. And Etzor is a funding vehicle to encourage a couple of circular startups. It's an innovation studio now. We work with 2. We work with Uplift 360 and Marina Techs, and we have helped them go from early stage startup to like really fly. A lot of that is to do with investment, but also time. So we kind of co-founded with them. But then from that, we've learned so much. So we're now doing a whole load of, we work with, I work a lot with waste companies, and they say, I've got this. What can we do with it? How can we make it more efficient? How can we get new materials out of it? If it's got value. So It's very technical.
Yeah. One of the other interesting elements on your CV is that you're a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Waste Management.
Yeah.
You see waste as a design flaw. You've already talked about it a little bit, but can you pinpoint the moment when your interest in waste started?
I was thinking about this earlier. So there's two things, I think. One of them was that, I'm very into colour as a designer. I love colour. I love materials. And when we were working, one of our very first projects at Thomas Matthews in 1999, I think we started, was at the Earth Centre in Doncaster. I think you've had Jonathan.
We have had Jonathan Smells on the pod, yeah. Talks a little bit about the Earth Centre.
Exactly. So he was one of our very first clients. And we went and said, look, we need to talk about and communicate and have interesting conversations about sustainability in a way that wasn't really being done apart from, we really connected on that. And one of the things we wanted to do, and we ended up doing, was building a whole library of materials that we could use on site for that site. So we said no new materials, as much recycled content as possible, no PVC, for instance, things like that. It was a very demanding site. It was an ex-coal mine, very dusty, very windy, and they didn't bring loads of trees on that were, big and mature. They all grew everything from sapling small. So there were sort of constraints about what we could do. And so we built this materials library and kind of created all these, had 25-meter banners that went on the side of a Field and Clegg Bradley building made from polyester and one of the first big scale digital printers. So we could take these panels off and put them in the washing machine because it was very dusty, and then put them back up again. And we made all this signage out of old polystyrene cups pressed into sort of white planks and scaffold and all this. Just had such a lot of fun with it. And it really sort of I totally engaged with the fact that actually materials can be part of the story. It's very McLarenism, isn't it? Like medium is the message. And I've just taken that through all the way through my work.
Do you think the Earth Centre was ahead of its time?
Oh, God, yeah.
Because obviously it was a huge failure, wasn't it? I mean, it closed almost instantly.
I mean, it was a failure in some respects. What it was a success of was that it engaged with local communities. So the ex-coalmen, they were there planting and regenerating all the land, because you have to remember they built the soil back up again by using human sewage, by creating these amazing ponds and algae pipes, etc. So all of the guys who used to work on the coal mine, who then had nothing to do, were there planting and looking after and tendering all the allotment areas. And the other thing it did was like really engage architects. So it had this amazing collection of designers and architects working on it, which we still, I still worked with until we closed the doors in April. And they're like lifelong friends. We've just kept going, and we all have that same message of like, this stuff really does work. And the other thing that was amazing and success about it was the fact that it was designed with a 100-year plan. So the trees, as I said, were saplings when they went in. If you go there now, it's just an amazing green, lush pit of planting. So in effect, yes, it was a failure because the model didn't work, because, we couldn't get people there. And also, with then Millennium funding, you had to match fund it. So if you're given 50 million quid, that's quite hard to get out of a northern local authority, isn't it?
Yes, true. Yes, I'm sure. So that was the first project. You were talking about two.
So the second thing that happened to me was around about 2009, I think, or 2010, where I joined a UKTI, as it was then.
This is the trip to the Netherlands.
The trip to the Netherlands.
2011, Sophie.
Thanks, Grant.
That's right.
And going to the Netherlands, it was an amazing trip. We went around all of these facilities. So that was the first time I really went to loads of different facilities around and looking at how glass was recycled.
This is because they banned landfill.
Yes, in 96. So they were sort of forced that they couldn't just pile it in a hole, and then they had to do something with it. So they had these amazing technical solutions for everything. And one of them was going to this really, really high-tech fridge recycling facility, which I've talked about a lot. One side was really, really high-tech. The other side, when the container sea containers came, they opened the door and all these fridges would fall out, and they'd all be different, even if they were made by the same company. They would have bits on the back there. So these guys were just effectively trying really hard to get the back off, to get the compressors out before they crushed it. And it just took them forever. And all the screwdrivers were different. Nothing was the same. And I was like, I feel really bad.
Because every appliance is designed differently.
Every appliance is designed differently. So one fridge you could take apart with one screwdriver, and the next one come along and you need 15. And it was just so impossible. And we were like, basically we designed the front, but we never designed the back. And I said, I need to line up all the fridge designers behind this guy and publicly apologize to him and actually ask, also it's like, ask him, what do you want me to do to design it better? Because there's no conversation with end of life and beginning of life. And that was the beginning of the Great Recovery. I came back moaning about it so much, and my husband just said, do something about it then. I'm like, fine, I will.
Yeah, because the Great Recovery literally started the year later, didn't it? 2012. And that was a project that was kind of incubated by the RSA, Royal Society of Arts, and Innovate UK.
Yeah, well, it was incubated at the Useful Simple Trust, and I took it to the RSA because we had to run it through an organisation for Innovate UK to support it. So I seconded myself over there to begin.
Yeah. I was always interested in that because you seem to have this successful practice, and then you ended up at the RSA.
Yeah.
Well, did people in the practice not go, where's she gone? Why is she doing this?
Yeah. They did.
Yeah, they did.
I said,
okay.
I'll be back. I'm coming. But, I think it's a really important thing to do. So I kind of...
You absconded for 4 years.
Yeah. And my wonderful Urge colleague, stroke amazing designer, Alexi, stepped in and ran the ship for 4 years while I wasn't there.
Did she do a better job?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you did the Great Recovery for 4 years, and you showed, about 1,000?
Yeah.
You took 1,000 designers to waste sites to see where their products kind of went to die, like in elephant's graveyard or something. So what did you learn from that scheme?
That designers have no clue where their stuff ends up, and why would they? That the brief does not ever talk about second, third, or fourth life. So it always talks about the user experience of how you design something, but it never tells you about getting the material back out again. So you're basically not thinking about those materials being the long life and the product being the blip of just part of that material lifespan. You're thinking that is it. So it's no wonder that we've got waste piles everywhere, and that, the UK has got the fastest growing electronic waste stream in the world. And, we just don't connect to it.
I mean, these products you're talking about, they're global products. That's not British design, is it? Or British manufacture. That's global manufacture.
No, but then, if you think about Brexit happened and we pulled out of a lot of the EU Circular Economy Act, and we were going to be paralleling it, but it's all very slow, and it's kind of exactly like design. One of the other things that when we were doing the Great Recovery was that when we were working with companies and manufacturers, they ship around the world, and their biggest markets are Europe and in the US. So actually for things now, I'm talking to quite a lot of companies about forever chemicals, so PFAS, and you take the American law. If you want to go and sell in America, you've got to really be quite strict about PFAS.
PFAS is what?
The forever chemicals.
Okay.
There's a lot of talk about it at the moment. I don't know if you know much about that, but Mark Miodownik's been doing a whole series on Radio 4 about it. But it's quite they're forever chemicals because they last forever, and they're used as like water repellents. So things like Teflon and clothing, waterproof clothing, and things like that. So, but they're very they think that they're endocrine disruptors, and they get into your blood, and it's very difficult. And they're getting banned everywhere at the moment, but we're lagging behind. So the point is that we can use the fact that designers sell across the world to actually use them to say, if you want to sell there, you've actually got to really take note of that. If you want to go into European markets, you do have to think about circularity. It's useful.
Okay. And a decade on from the Great Recovery, do you see products where you can detect its legacy?
The fact that we're still talking about circular design is, I would say, is part of not my legacy, but the legacy of the moment where we were really pushing it. I mean, that whole project, Great Recovery, was really about investigating the role that design has in the statistic that 80% of the environmental impact of a product is predetermined at concept stage of the design process. So as soon as I get a brief, I read it and start thinking and putting sort of pencil to paper, then I start to determine where that product will end up eventually. So that's quite powerful. If you've got a load of designers which are thinking about that, whether it's about building a house, creating an electronic product, or, printing a book, if you understand the life cycle, the lifespan of your product and design it accordingly, or try to at least have some kind of notion of what it is, then that is the legacy of that work, I think.
I hope you're enjoying the episode. We have some significant news for Material Matters. I'm delighted to say that we have a new home for our London Fair. We're heading east and we'll be collaborating with Media 10 as part of Shoreditch Design Week from the 15th to the 17th of September. The fair will be set across 2 floors of unlocked Shoreditch, a striking multi-storey former industrial building located on Curtain Road. However, while our home might have changed, the ethos of the fair remains the same. It will be full of manufacturers, organisations, makers and designers who place the importance of material intelligence at the heart of what they do. So, if you're interested in taking part, do get in touch at hello@materialmatters.design. That's hello@materialmatters.design. And before that, remember that Material Matters Copenhagen takes place from the 10th to the 12th of June. We're back at Ukraine House, Gamel Dock, with an array of brilliant exhibitors, including AHEC Europe, which will be presenting a very special exhibition. If you're planning on visiting 3 days of design, do make sure you stop by. You won't regret it, I promise. Having done a little bit of research about you, one of the products that you highlight when you discuss waste is the toothbrush. I mean, you've said in the past that you're obsessed with the toothbrush.
I do have quite a lot. People send me toothbrushes and go, what about this? Yeah.
So what are the issues around that particular product? Why are you obsessed with the toothbrush?
Well, I think it's a very easily identifiable product to start with. That's how I used to talk about it, because toothbrushes, supposedly they have a lifespan of about 3 months, according to dentists. And with the research that we did, it definitely should be 3 months, because they do get full of quite a lot of bacteria. Yeah, exactly. But they're designed for ease of manufacturing. So they're often 3 or 4 different plastics. They're glued together. Some of the ones that we did teardowns on, very simple models where you've got the squidgy bit and the hard bit and the nylon tufts. You cut the head off and you realize they've got little metal pins holding all the nylon brush head in. And it can't go anywhere because it's been co-molded. You can't take the plastics apart and you can't recycle them together. So you've got this product which actually has no destination. And when we got really interested in them, we did a kind of carbon analysis on them, as well as a carbon analysis looking at the data and the impact data on an electronic one as well, and sort of testing whether the materials or whether the water had the biggest impact. And they just have massive impact but the problem is they're so cheap. They're made of a fossil fuel which we could just spin out. And this is, before bamboo brushes and before other brushes.
That was going to be my next question. How should we design the toothbrush better in that case?
Well, 1 plastic would probably help, and not 4. Definitely not to put metal pins in it, because also it didn't matter how cheap. It wasn't a price point thing. It was just how it was made on the machinery. And probably there are some better ones. There are some electric ones now which you can take apart. You can send for repair. But yeah, common problem. I don't know the answer to that question, Grant.
Sorry. That's my job, to ask you questions occasionally that you don't know the answer to.
I wish I knew the answer, because then I'd be really rich, because I'd be designing it and selling it.
Yeah, well, yeah. And then I could claim some kind of IP on it, I think.
Yeah, you could have a bit of IP. Maybe chewing on a stick, like they used to do that, chew on licorice.
Yeah, they did. You wrote once that being a designer that puts environmentalism and purpose at the same level of importance as form and function can be tough, a career path full of guilt and confliction. So when you wake up in the morning, Sophie Thomas, are you riddled with guilt?
Oh, man. I think I've spent my entire career trying to appease my guilt. This is probably why I do stuff like the Great Recovery. We used to have this thing in Thomas Matthews. We were like, the first question we would ask ourselves is, should we actually be designing this? And will it end up just piling up in a landfill site? And it's hard, because I just love creating. I'm a creative person. It's actually so, anyone who's a designer or an artist has it deep within them, and it's just one of their things they can't stop doing. So we want to create new things, new objects, new prints, etc., etc. And you just think, oh man, I should stop. But I suppose what I'm now doing is shifting away from trying to shift away from using my raw materials as new. So building in waste into my raw material as my beginning point, so that I'm not having such a massive impact in terms of that. So things like acrylic paint, incredible impact this stuff has. It's made from plastic. It seems that all of the kind of creative materials that artists use, if you go to an art shop, it has the same problems of sustainability.
Well, do you think the design industry is doing enough to promote circularity and regenerative design?
I mean, yes and no. You've got things like Design Council doing having their ambition to skill up 1 million designers with green skills. But the piece we're currently doing is trying to get designers to work out a methodology of getting how designers can talk to waste managers, because it's not part of us, of our system, current way of doing it, that we talk about end of life before we've even started designing the piece itself. So in that sense, yes, and I'm still trying to do changes like that. But in other senses, it's still like a module in a curriculum. And actually the interest wanes and rises. And at the moment, we're at a bit of a wane. It's not that important anymore. I think it had a lot of energy behind it a few years ago, and it's kind of, people have gone off it a bit, which is very worrying, I think.
So when a designer receives a brief, Sophie, what are the first things they should think about in your view?
Well, I always think, is it about redesigning the brief, rewriting the brief to begin with? A very good example of that was when we got the brief for the No Shop project, which came from Friends of the Earth, and they were bringing it to Carlo Larson. I don't know if you know Carlo Larson, who used to run Adbusters, and he was from Canada. He was doing Buy Nothing Day in America and Canada, and they were talking about Friends of the Earth were bringing it to the UK for the first time, and they wanted us. The brief was to design a poster for a library, which could go into all the different libraries. And we were reading it, going, "Where's the impact of that? It's just ridiculous." So we sort of sent it back saying, actually, what you need to do is do a shop that sells nothing on the high street. And they were like, okay, great, here, no more budget, which is a bit crap. Off you go. And we did it. And we had like 6 or 7 different TV vans come up, on the street before it opened, and did all their, I'm standing in front of No Shop.
Where was it?
It was in Waterloo.
Okay.
And it was in an old butcher's, I think, originally, and we created this No Shop where you went in, it had all these like sale messages, and you walked out and it had all these questions about if you actually needed it, and you can go away with a Buy Nothing bag, but No Shop bag, and the actual leaflet, the poster content was on a receipt at the bottom of the bag, so you could pick it up. So again, really clever, engaging. So all the stuff that I really love doing, that interaction of how design is the most powerful it can be. So it really taught us in the studio to rewrite briefs, look at a brief and go, are they asking the right question? And if you're thinking about circularity, it's about, are you trying to solve the right problem? Because often with circularity, it's not about the product itself. You could think, I'm designing a keyboard for a computer, and actually the best way to do it is to have it be disassembled. But you can't, there's no point doing that, because you just bung it in if you put it into an e-waste facility in the UK, it gets crushed and melted. So there's just no point. So you have to understand the system. So designing the system. So then you have to work out, where can I have the impact? Because I'm just a designer doing this stuff. So that's where it gets complicated.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, as you point out, it isn't as easy as necessarily just choosing a sustainable material, which is probably the wrong thing to say on a podcast all about materials. But, you've said in the past, and you used the computer analogy, that material substitution is not a silver bullet. I mean, you cited the example of a company that made an eco computer and fundamentally clad the machine in bamboo. But then at the end of life, the e-waste facility couldn't identify the bamboo, and it ended up contaminating tons of plastic waste that could have been recovered. So designers need to think about systems in a more holistic way, I guess, is what you're saying.
Exactly. And that story came from the e-waste facility, and they were saying, we were like, what can we do? How can we design things better? And they told us that. We were like, oh my God. Because we were going away going, yeah, look, it was called an eco computer, and it was like, and it looked great. And you or I were looking at it going, oh, look at that. That's a good sustainable choice. And yeah, no, their machines couldn't identify it, caused a huge amount of problems. And actually, that's a really good example of how, the communication between waste and design, end of life and beginning of life. If the designer had known that at the beginning, they wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have done it, because they would have just said, oh, well, that's just, and that happens a lot. That every time we go to a waste facility, you just learn stories like that and go, wow, that's really, why didn't we know that before?
In amongst all this stuff that you do, the work with Thomas Matthews, the Great Recovery Project, going to waste dumps the whole time, you've also created products and pieces that highlight issues. I mean, you work with the brilliant glassblower Louis Thompson on a project called Broken Ocean. It was based around your collection of ocean plastic picked up from a beach in Hawaii, which you've kind of mentioned already. Used waste glass. So what was the thinking behind that? Because it was launched, I think I'm right in saying it, Collect, the Crafts Council's high-end craft show in the Saatchi Gallery. So it was an art. It was a piece of art.
It was a piece of art, and it was for Collect Open, which happened, in 2019. So it was the year before COVID, and we applied to do it because I'd actually met Louis through working with him on an award that we designed for arts and business, and he created these amazing pieces for us, helped us make our vision come true. And then I kept saying to him, oh, I really want to do something with these bits of plastic. And I sort of came along with a shopping bag one day and said, look at these. And if you know Louis' work, he's an amazing master glass blower, and he is so accurate and so technical with his glass. So our collaboration is hilarious, because I come in and I'm like this chaotic bag of plastic bits and just causing trouble, and he's there trying to, with his very precise techniques. And he's like, sometimes I say to him, how do we do this? How we were trying to make representations of plastic rope caught in volcanic rocks, and they're called plastic glomerites, and they're actually they first found them in Hawaii. And I wanted to recreate these stones with these pebbles, with these kind of bits of shards of or bits of rope stuck in them. And we actually used an ancient Venetian chandelier technique for twisting and creating these very long canes, and then twisting them and knotting them, and then setting them in these glass pebbles. So I kind of invited him to let's do some work together, and we went in. We applied for the Collect Open and got a position there, and then won Collect Open with it. And then the V&A bought 2 of our pieces for their which are now in their permanent collection, and they're currently on show, which is an amazing thing, you know. But it is a really good testimony of bringing people, collaborating with people who are very different from you, but are willing to work together to create something completely different. And it was such fun. You know, I've got him now collecting. He sort of sends me the odd message saying, "Oh, I've collected another bit of waste cut off glass from this piece." I mean, he would have never done that before. So it's a brilliant thing. And we've got some ideas for our next set of pieces, hopefully to do this year.
It's ongoing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We've done Broken Ocean and Ghost Ocean, so we recreated it last year, and we're still making and still selling them. People love them.
Okay, all right. So there's a textile project as well.
Yes,
Clean Up Camo with Ella Duran.
Yes,
which was about plastic pollution. You made scarves and ties. I mean, what was the thinking behind that?
So I was just going through my collection actually I had these very beautiful flat pieces that I collected from a particular beach they'd obviously been worn away and kind of for like 20 years, I reckon. But I was just lying them on the floor and saying, "Look at these, they look like camouflage." And we were like, "Yeah, brilliant." So we sort of developed a whole textile design from it. And then when Waste Age was happening in Design Museum, we sort of proposed to do a series of projects with it, and actually a little product, sorry. And then we gave some of the profits to Surface Against Sewage. And then we also did a whole carbon footprint on it and worked out how to get the materials back, because they are all mono-material products. So they're all even everything in them, even the zip, all of the stitching, everything is all polyester, and therefore can be completely recycled if you wanted to get it recycled. Even the velvet cushions are not velvet. Well, they are. They're post-consumer polyester velvet.
Okay. And I should explain, Waste Age was a show all about designing with waste at the Design Museum a few years ago now. So it's important for you to create physical products to make your point.
Yes, I am. That's just what I said. I'm a creator. I love to create stuff, which is like the problem that keeps me up all night.
That's the guilt. There's the guilt right there.
So I have to do all these educational pieces.
I can feel it pouring through the microphone, the guilt.
And then the other project I'm doing, as I said, is with Becky Early.
Yes, let's talk about your project with Becky Early. What is this all about? Because I know nothing about this.
I know. Well, it hasn't really launched properly.
No, well, this is exciting.
It's really a thing about activists wanting to have more messaging on their clothing. So it goes back to the Kathleen Hamlet, T-shirts where she wore with Thatcher. But we want to do a whole range of pieces which people can rent or, buy, that have these kind of political messages within them, but they are beautifully and chaotically letterpressed onto these pieces. And we've done a couple of test pieces. So my dress was one, but another shirt we did has got a Tibor Kalman message on it, which says, "Good designers make trouble." So, but it's not obvious. It's not like a T-shirt design. It's actually kind of built into the structure, and it's a recycled secondhand charity polyester, because you have to use polyester to do the process. So, you say that I'm sort of two sides of something I love to create, and I'm really also very into the materials and the technical. These projects kind of bring the two together, because it's not just about creating a scarf or a piece of glass. It's actually the process behind it. How are we sourcing the materials? How are we collecting it back? What's the heat process? What's the carbon impact? So there's a lot behind it.
And you have this background, as we've discussed, in graphic design. You trained at St. Martin's and the Royal College of Art and founded Thomas Matthews with Christine Matthews, who you met at the Royal College. That happened in 1997. Your first project together started at the college. So what did you do for What Comes Around Goes Around?
Well, we were sitting in the cafe drinking coffee, as many creative people do. And we were then thinking, wow, there's a lot of coffee cups, and watching all everyone in the, and they were, at that point, they were polystyrene, white polystyrene. So we went into, we were sort of saying, wonder why they don't have like porcelain or, like ceramic mugs and wash them. And so we went into the canteen office and asked them, and then they allowed us to look at all of their their accounts, and we worked out that they spent like, tens of thousands on these coffee cups. And we actually thought you could buy a lot of dishwashers for that, and coffee cups, and ceramic ones. So we collected a week's worth of waste with the canteen staff, washed them, and then hung all the waste in the galleries. So it was about 5,600 polystyrene cups, and about 18 or 1,600 cans a week were thrown away.
Because nothing was being recycled at that point, right?
Nothing was being recycled. And so we hung all these things in the gallery. We did all these posters on old bits of tin or litho plates, and sort of everything was very much about the material. And then we created a cup. So we printed a mug and we sold it to people for £2. And then every time they used it in the canteen, they got 3p off, which was the price of the cup. And with the money we raised, we then bought all the bins for recycling glass, paper, cans, and cardboard, I think, and put them around college, and then talked to the waste company at that point and said, can we change the contract that you've already got? And we saved the college £50 a week. We saved them £50 a week.
Yeah, you do wonder what the college's facilities manager was doing at the time.
Oh my God. I know. Yeah. Anyway, so that's still going, I think. They're still recycling and they've expanded it out.
Very good.
Yeah.
I wonder what the response to that was, because at that point, sustainability wasn't really part of the design debate, certainly not in the way that it is now.
The students really loved it because they thought it was just a really beautiful installation. And also, you know how students they doodle on everything, right? So they do, if you've ever doodled on polystyrene, it's really satisfying. And you go into the wall and you'd find all these cups with everybody's doodle. So you could identify your own coffee on this wall of cups. And I went to have coffee with Margaret Calvert a few months ago, and she still got her mug.
Right. And Margaret, we should say, is the woman that pioneered the motorway signage.
Yes. And she was an amazing tutor at the Royal College at that point, and a real kind of leader in female designers. Of course, you have to remember, me and Christine were one of the we were one of the small cohorts of female design-led studios at that point as well. So it went down really, really well. That's the thing. And actually people were really, I think it was like that sustainability had up to then that real hairy jumper attitude towards it. And it was all very, recycled paper was didn't work, and nothing was very nice aesthetically. And then we were just doing this big graphic campaign, big screen prints, this huge wall. And it was kind of very compelling to look at.
Presumably at that point, you must have, because when I asked you about your interest in waste, you went back to 2011.
Yeah.
But in 1997, when you were at the Royal College of Art, when you were a student, you didn't just have a eureka moment looking in the cafe, did you? You must have had an interest in the subject already.
Yeah, absolutely. And what that project really also helped us to understand is that you can do a very compelling sort of poster, but if you have got the data behind you, you can also then use that data to really implement change. So it wasn't just about creating this exhibition. It actually had this whole process of changing the system as well.
Okay.
And so I really learnt that then. But there's a point I have to go, if I'm really, really honest with you, I have to go right back.
Be honest, Sophie. That's definitely the point of the podcast.
Yeah, I know. I just realised. So when I was probably about 7, we used to live in Oxford. I mean, before I came up to London, we lived in Oxford, and there down the road from us, there was an old Victorian dump, right? So it's the kind of ones where you dig up and you find sort of Victorian pots and things. And in there, I found my first toothbrush.
Wow.
A Victorian toothbrush. And I was like, what is this? It was a bone toothbrush handle, and you could still see the little holes where all the badger or horse bristles went, and it had green stripes on the back, faint green stripes. So there you go. And so then I've always been obsessed with stuff like that, toothbrushes and waste.
You said in your TEDx talk that you did in Berlin, I think last year, that purpose, activism and justice has always been in your blood. You described your parents as activists. In what sense? What did they do? They
were big CND supporters. They were on the Aldermaston marches. They were being, arrested in different places and my mum was at Greenham we spent a long time going, I grew up basically on protest marches, different places. Living in Oxford, we were surrounded by American bases at that time. So that really instilled in me the kind of need for protest and the importance of protest. And I still really fundamentally believe in that. You cannot, if you are feeling upset about something and you're feeling that things aren't being done the way you want them to do, you have to vote. You have to be vocal about things not being in your name. And you have to, as a communicator and as a designer, I have to also find ways to engage people and activate people in a different way, because often if you're just like throwing messages and it becomes noise, doesn't it? So that's really that is actually one of the reasons I went into graphic design. I'm not a trained typographer. I'm an image maker, and I would suggest that I'm a graphic activist, and I will definitely be going back into those roots from now on, I think, because we need it.
What did you talked about them, what they protested about. What did they do professionally, your parents?
So my mum worked in the visual arts department at Oxford Brookes and is an amazing drawer and artist. And my dad was a teacher in urban planning and modernism at Brookes as well. So he was an academic.
Yeah. And your mum came from a kind of visual background.
Yeah.
So what were you like at school? Were you always going to be a graphic designer?
No. I mean, it's really funny. I was listening to on the radio about, that in the past they used to do those, like when you were doing careers advice, and you had to do, when I was going through school, you had a multiple choice question about what, and it told you what you should go and do. Did you ever do that, Grant?
Probably.
Did it say, you should be a podcast?
Yeah, oddly, that wasn't on the tick box. Yeah, they used to take the piss out of me at university because I was studying history and I was mates with loads of engineers, and they used to say, you're just going to be a librarian when you find your grant. And I was going, no, you can do loads with a history degree. And I went into the careers department the first and only time when I was at university in Southampton. And I looked up what you can do with a history degree. And top of the list was librarian.
Librarian.
So there you go. So
you're an archivist of some degree, aren't you?
Up to a point.
So anyway, mine said, I don't know where it came from, that I should go into the fishing industry.
Oh, wow.
And cool. I was like, never thought about it. And I was talking to someone about it a couple of weeks ago, and they were like, well, you just told me you were working with a company that was making new biomaterials out of fish waste. So you're currently in. I was like, oh my God, yeah. There you go. It was truthful.
What goes around comes around.
So at school, I was creative. I was frustrated. I tell you, I was frustrated when I went to do my A-levels. I wanted to do chemistry, geography, and art, and they wouldn't let me take chemistry because you have to take maths with chemistry, which is really annoying because now basically I do chemistry, geography, and art. So it frustrates me that the way that we are pushing people through an educational system doesn't actually take into account the kind of creativity of what we really do need for future resilience, and allowing us to have those choices that doesn't push you through to a particular career position.
Mm. So tell me, you'd done this project at the Royal College of Art. You'd hung waste up, and you brought recycling in, and saved the college money. Was that easy to translate that specific interest into a business when you left?
No, only by doing it ourselves, I think. And you have to remember that in the middle. So when you get kicked out of art college, I don't know, I'm sure it happens now, but there was an immediate panic about getting a job. So everyone's like frantically looking for some kind of position somewhere. And I managed to get a position as a middleweight designer at the Body Shop Design Studios with Anita Roddick. And God knows how they got me in there, because I really bluffed it all the way through. Like, can you use this program? Can you use this? Yeah. I just spent 2 years screen printing and doing and making things out of waste. So, but you can see the connection, the work. They really loved the work that we were doing, and what was really great. And I was only there for a year. I really learnt it was a kind of apprenticeship effectively of how to be a graphic designer, because I wasn't your normal graphic designer. And working with Anita was amazing because she taught me that sustainability and kind of social value, having a moral compass, does work with business. You can have a successful business and do that. You won't make trillions of dollars, but you will have a very good career. And from that, I kind of came out with the belief, and Christine was working, she was still working at the Royal College. We came out just saying, yes, we'll do it. And we started by finding a project. So the Earth Centre we got the commission for that. And then we realized we didn't even have a computer or a checkbook or a studio. So we had to sort of build from that point. We didn't even have a name as a studio, actually. We came up with we just put our names together and came up with a manifesto and sold it on that. So, and the rest is 28 years later, really.
Was it difficult watching that brand that you created together disappear?
It was, but it was also the right time. 28 years, I just felt that, it's done its work. And actually what was great, what was so wonderful about doing that and saying, it's not the end of the people, it's not the end of the era, but actually there are people now doing it, building it into their sustainability, building it into their graphic design studio. Whereas when we started, everyone was laughing at us going, sustainability, graphic design, what a weird fit. And we were like, no, it's really obvious, and then we just had to spend half the time just promoting it.
Were they actually laughing at you? I mean, is that how you felt?
Yeah.
Or did people come up and were there brickbats?
Well, I think they just thought we were a bit daft because we were restricting ourselves so much. So we were saying, well, we can't use that material and we can't do it like that. But it did make us work so much harder. Because, if you if you close down the obvious doors, your brain just has to be much more cleverer. And so for us, it was, we had a great time, and all the people who worked with us learned. Everybody who came through the door as a designer, we trained up. They really got to understand how to scrutinize materials, how to procure properly. It's that real principle and practice kind of understanding what you believe in and then trying to make it happen.
Can you give an example of that, Sophie?
In what way?
Well, a project where you used a very specific material that maybe hadn't been used before and most graphic designers were not using it.
Actually, the example I would give, we worked with Leeds Museum, and it was quite recently, actually. It was only about 3 or 4 years ago, where we were brought in. We won the job to redesign a whole gallery. And it was the Earth Galleries, and we just said to them that actually what we should try and do is to reuse as much as possible, but what on top of that we will manage and work out whether we did, how much carbon we saved, and whether it was a good or bad thing to do. So we ended up reusing lots of the panel. I mean, this gallery was from the 80s, so you can imagine what it was like. And there were some great stories that we pulled out. So we always, in our studio, we have a no PVC policy. So vinyl is so prolific in graphic design. You see it on banners, in exhibitions. And we said, no, we're not going to do that. So, but we had all these walls which had terrible graphics on that we wanted to reuse. So we had to cover them in a non-PVC vinyl, which you can get. But the problem with it is that it's thinner. So we had to put a white behind it. So it was 2 layers of this material, which actually completely used up all the carbon that we were saving. So all of these stories around there were really tricky to do. But and we published the whole thing. So we said, this is how you do it. If you want to do reused material in an exhibition context where you've really got to test the offset, we had these really interesting examples where we had some small text panels that were going into a big glass case, and we had to test them for off-gassing. And because they were post-consumer papers, they didn't pass because of the ink, the sort of legacy inks within the paper. And the stuff they had in there before was probably like 100 times worse, but they didn't test it in the same way. So we couldn't use certain materials that we wanted to use. So in the end, we published all the data, and they got we saved about 40% of the carbon footprint just by making decisions of swapping out and changing and papering and whatever. So really good example of like actually changing it, because we set ourselves such a strict brief of not using anything, using as much reuse as possible within the space, and working with local communities to, who are wood recycling to get new panels in, etc. So it was a great learning process. So we're still doing it. We were still doing it.
Well, very good. Our time is very nearly up. As we established at the top of the interview, you have all these different positions and jobs, Sophie. But what can we expect from you in the near future? I mean, you obviously have the project with Becky Early happening, but what else?
I have glass. I have... so one of the things that I'm doing is I'm stepping away from my consultation period. So when Thomas Matthews closed, I was continuing as senior director at the Useful Simple Trust, and I'm about to finish that. So it is allowing me to have extra time to go back into my creative practice. And one of the things I'm doing is, as I said, I'm trying to create my own raw materials, so my own inks, so my own printing inks, which I've started to do, but like literally from waste materials. So one of my prints, for instance, is made from carbon that's been extracted from old tires, like tire mountains. And I'm going to be doing that myself. So I'm learning all these really old techniques of how to make inks, how to make glue, how to create different materials that I use, on a day-to-day basis in my letterpress and printmaking. So I'm going to go back into that. And generally just making more of my own work, which is exciting and daunting at the same time. But really going back to my roots, I suppose, of like where I came from originally. And for that I am really looking forward to, as well as continuing with Etzel. So yes, many hats, Grant. But, it's just, I'm a bit of a magpie.
Well, it sounds like you're losing a couple of hats. You're going to lose a couple of hats. And, and it's all about ink from now on.
It's all about ink. Well, it is for this year. I'm really looking into ink.
A year of ink. Very good. Well, look, we look forward to seeing the finished results at the end of the year. Sophie, thank you very much for your time. I really, really enjoyed that.
It was a mad, twisty-turny journey, wasn't it?
There's been some twists and some turns, almost certainly. No, it's very good. Sophie, thanks so much.
Thank you.
To find out more about Sophie's work, there are several websites to go to, really. For her work going forward, check out wastedtalent.me. For the Thomas Matthews years, go to thomas.matthews.com. And then there's Etzel, which is etzel.com. You can go to our website to hear other podcasts that I've done, to sign up to our newsletter, and to find out all about the various events we'll be running in 2026, including Material Matters Copenhagen. One more thing, it would make me incredibly happy if you went to my Patreon page and made a pledge at patreon.com/Material Matters. For as little as £3.50 a month, you can receive invites to various Material Matters events, as well as getting access to each episode before it's published to the wider world. Material Matters is a completely independent concern, and any help you could offer would be hugely appreciated. Ultimately, you'll be helping to take the message of the importance of materials, skill, craft, and design to a whole new audience. Thanks very much for listening.